Does that work? Does that work, folks? Can we hear me? 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3. We had a different input capture here. Monitor and output. Let's try that. Can you hear, guys? Mention in the chat if you can hear me for sure. We'll start over here. You can hear me? First word sounds like audio. Okay. All right. Can you still hear me? We'll start fresh here in just a moment. All right. We got audio. Okay. Good. All right. Sorry about that, folks. I don't know what was going on there. Alrighty, let's start over. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Brock Beard from NASCAR.info coming at you after the conclusion of the Bank of America Roval 400 at the Charlotte Motor Speedway, where we have immediate championship implications after an insane finish to this particular race. After what was an unusually quiet and placid start to the event with very low attrition. So people who like chaos got what they wanted, and people who wanted relatively calm racing that just focused on mechanical issues, that would be, I think everybody kind of got what they wanted out of this one, unless, of course, you're a Kyle Larson fan, and then I'm sure you're very upset at what took place there at the end of it. Once again, kind of like with Talladega, I'm not exactly sure where to start with this one. But I guess we can start with the race winner himself, Christopher Bell, taking his, what would they be, his second victory of the season, his first since New Hampshire earlier this summer, pulling off a really dramatic victory at the end of this. He actually had about the same, well, I mean, he was kind of working on a variant of the strategy that should have worked for Ryan Sieg in the Saturday Xfinity race. Did not work out well for Sieg. He came up just short of making the next round of the playoffs. We'll talk about that more in our Xfinity Series segment. But on the Cup Series side here, there was just enough restarts. Although it seemed like from his interview, he didn't particularly even need the last restart. It seemed like he's going to be tracking down Kevin Harvick at the finish there, but pulling off a tremendous victory. It's easy to forget that, of course, Christopher Bell's first career Cup victory actually came on an infield road course, that being the Daytona road course last year, but really kind of figuring out, what he needs to do. And this season, I think that, he's been one of the drivers that's really made the adjustment to this new car quite well. Kind of reminiscent of the battle that he and Harvick had back at Richmond, where Harvick very nearly did not get his second consecutive victory, and Bell was tracking him down at the finish of that, and then getting back in line at that point. So, again, I think it's going to be very interesting to see if he can get to the championship 4. We got the next 3 rounds coming up with Vegas, Homestead, and Martinsville. They're going to be very interesting. Those are tracks that, again, I'm not sure if you can really favor some drivers over others. They seem to, given the way this year's been, it's really hard to tell. Although Martinsville wasn't really the best race of the year. In fact, I think it could be argued it was probably one of the least competitive back in the spring when William Byron dominated it there under the lights. We'll see if that's going to be any different. I know Denny Hamlin wasn't particularly looking forward to it from his comments earlier about the car. But I think it was a pretty wild race. I know that there could be, again, kind of talking about, just overall the feel of this one here. I don't think it was entirely positive or negative, because you certainly had people, if you track a lot of what was going on social media there during it, obviously you had a lot of people that were bored about this race. It's like, look, I think there was somebody who was tweeting at a point saying, look, they can't all be winners. They can't all be barn burners. And that's true. I think that's one thing that in NASCAR has kind of been forgotten, is that you could have a race where, somebody that has the best car has the best car, and they go out there and they dominate and they lead the most laps, and that's the end of it. In this particular case, it could have very easily been AJ Allmendinger or Chase Elliott going on to cruise to victory here. And some races play out that way. I think that's what makes it that much more special when crazy stuff happens at the end of it. These days, it's almost the norm that you're going to get a late race restart, or you're going to get an overtime finish, or you're going to get multiple overtime finishes, and it's going to just completely, turn the race on its head. And I guess it could be argued that that's just the way that the racing is nowadays, where there's so much immediate payoff for actually being able to win a race, or, work your way from the next to the next round there. And you have to be that aggressive. And certainly in the case of today, where it was just a couple of points, which now are just a couple of positions, that could absolutely separate whether or not you're going to go for the championship these next 4 races, or whether or not you're going to be just waiting till next season and just, hitting a hard reset and starting over again. I'm of two minds of it. I mean, I like when a race is able to kind of play out to its natural conclusion. I like the drama of when there's, particular mechanical issues, and this car has had no shortage of them. I know that a lot of those mechanical issues have to be really addressed coming into next year as to safety. Obviously, with Alex Bowman being eliminated from playoff contention before this race even started, with him missing out this race, certainly sending our thoughts to him, as well as he and Kurt Busch are now recovering from their concussions. Another driver that was out of the field today, I don't know if it received much attention, was Cody Ware out of the field. We did see him back at the field in Talladega for the Super Speedway race last week, but it was decided with the demands of this particular road course race that we saw from Daniel Suarez struggling with the lack of power steering in this race, how serious that could be under less than ideal circumstances. I think it was a good decision to have Cody out of the car, put JJ Yaley in there, and get whatever finish they could at that point there. So looking forward to see if Cody's going to be coming back next week in Las Vegas. Obviously, we're still not hearing anything more from Alex Bowman or Kurt Busch as to what their plans are. If either of them are going to come back before the end of this year, it seems like it's still kind of a week-to-week thing for them. But it's or have we reached that point with Kurt Busch? Did Kurt actually announce that he wasn't going to come back the rest of this year? I haven't heard anything. I'm not recalling that off point. But I think that'd be another one to look at. But obviously, we got so few races left over. It'd probably be easier for drivers to just wait for next season. But again, all these different teams are going to have to figure all that out. There's a lot of things that I think the things that were troubling in this particular race were, again, the further issues with these cars that should be addressed that are more serious. I think specifically, we had Connor Daly make his first Cup Series start. We saw the Money Team return to the Cup Series for the first time since the Coca-Cola 600, which is good to see. Always good to see other teams that are able to compete back in here. Unfortunately, they had kind of a rough outing in this one. Looks like they had kind of an issue with the tire at some point as part of the fender was kind of shorn away when they were kind of featuring him there. Kudos to NBC for featuring him, by the way. But him coming down pit road and then having an electrical issue relating to the rear view camera. Apparently some of the wires were shorting and there was a bit of a small fire in there. And I think whether it's a small fire or a big fire, I think that should be treated just as seriously as what happened with Kevin Harvick and his the exhaust fires and what we saw earlier this year with Chris Buescher and so forth. Hopefully that's another thing that NASCAR is adding to their list as they continue to figure out what on earth they're going to be doing about, restructuring this car or figuring out what is going to be the approach going into next season. That's going to be definitely a big area of concern. Robbie Gordon flashback. Exactly. Yeah. Thinking back, Robbie Gordon, when he had the TV camera on board, actually shorting out and causing a fire, pretty serious fire back in 2001 at Watkins Glen. Yeah. Shades of that a little bit. But those are definitely things to kind of look at here too. And also the power steering. I mean, let's jump right into it. I think one of the things that was most alarming about this, and we saw steering issues at Bristol. This isn't necessarily unheard of. It was, of course, catastrophic for the 2311 team when both Ty Gibbs and Bubba Wallace lost many laps there, and then were coming back out on track. They had to replace that entire rack in the front of the car in the case of Bubba Wallace's. But sending them back out there and having that issue, to have that issue on a road course is even more difficult. I remember thinking back to 2002 and Ryan Newman making it to the finish of a race at Watkins Glen with no power steering, where he was trying to catch Tony Stewart for the win at the end of it. Ultimately, Stewart jumped the start, actually, and beat him for the victory in that one. But in this particular race where, we have so little attrition, Daniel Kvyat has dropped out and finished last place there. Correct me if I'm wrong on the pronunciation, by the way. I'm not big in following Formula One, but for Daniel and the number 26 car, will be your feature for the last place contender, pending, of course, the results of post-race inspection. We'll talk about that too, because he was about the only attrition that we had for about 2/3 of this race, right up to the point where Daniel Suarez started to have his issues with his power steering. He was absolutely struggling. I think the footage that we saw from the onboard there. It's good to see. I was actually relieved to see Suarez out of the car and actually arguing with Corey LaJoie after the finish of the race, that he wasn't just completely tuckered out. I was expecting that, fearing rather, that he was going to be in a situation like we saw with Clint Boyer in this race a couple of years ago, where he's just completely exhausted and leaning against the car after the finish of the race. I'm not sure if that was the case. I didn't see any shots of him as he was getting out of the car there. But regardless, I mean, muscling any of these cars around a road course without that, without the power steering, and then particularly with this one, with the new demands of the way it's set up and everything, and the fact that it's so much more of it is purposefully designed, it seems, for road courses, or at least was in its initial planning phase. We really saw the reality of that with what Suarez was dealing with this race. So I think that'll be something else to kind of look at the same time there for him. Certainly they can't have this many steering issues too. And I don't think it's just something that, I think that's where, again, NASCAR really needs to kind of reevaluate this for the next year. What things are just things that are just, prone to happen that, they can't particularly do anything about. Because of course you're always going to have engine failures. You're always going to have transmission failures. You're going to have things like that. But what are preventable things and things like that where, if the steering completely goes out, you can't have that happening, really at particular other tracks too. Say if you have a much higher speed track and the steering just goes out and, just locks up. And we saw a pretty big enough hit from what happened with Connor Daly in practice in this one, where the car just went straight into the fence there. You can't have that happening really just about anywhere. So I think that's another thing to kind of look at there too. But yeah, that's definitely another one to kind of look at the same time. But looking at the race results here, let me get that queued back up here. Again, your race winner, Christopher Bell over Kevin Harvick. Kyle Busch, probably one of the best runs we've seen out of him in several weeks, if not months. Actually finishing well there, finishing in the third spot. AJ Allmendinger in fourth, again, had one of the best cars out there. I know he's not eligible for points. Could have very easily been in position to be our 20th different winner, as was brought up in that discussion. We still have 4 more races left this year to perhaps break that tie with 2001 and the 19 winners that we had that year. I know it's still going into the round of 8, and the playoff drivers are going to be even more central to this. But we are seeing a lot of drivers that are also being eliminated from contention that potentially could kind of throw their hat back in the ring here. Justin Haley, another great finish for him, the 5th spot. Good to see him kind of build on the great run he had at Daytona back in the summer before he ended up in that big wreck. Good to see him get a good finish there. Chris Buescher in 6th. Again, he was, luckily didn't have the issues that he had at the Indy road course here, but this time around a 6th place run. 7th place finish. Got to give a call to Bubba Wallace on this. The fact that he had locked up the tires, had to go back out there and change the tires, get back on the track at that point, was your last place runner for a good part of the first stage of this. But he was obviously had a very fast car, was able to gain at the back of the field in just a matter of about 2 or 3 laps, and then start kind of clawing his way back up there. Yes, there was a lot of chaos that happened along the way, but managing to get back up there and finish 7th after all that, I think that's a tremendous run on his end, especially given the fact that that's your road course racing isn't really known to be certainly his preferred form of racing, but I think a good turnaround there. Speaking of road course drivers, Tyler Reddick in the 8th spot there. Looked like he was going to kind of work out some strategy there to kind of throw his hat back in there, follow up his win at Texas as well. Very nearly pulls off another one. I think, next year when things reset, whatever his situation is going to be, if he's going to really continue out that year with Childress, with Kyle Busch, planning on, coming on board, or, if there's going to be, we're hearing about a third team possibly, what's going to be happening with him, if he's going to go to 23-11 early. I think there's just a lot of stuff that's up in the air. Seeing some of this mentioned in the comments here as well. Of course, questions about Ty Gibbs versus Kurt Busch and others. Who knows what's happening, but I think wherever Reddick ends up, whatever he ends up driving next year, he's going to be a factor at these road courses if he has any amount of backing to it. He's really kind of, I know Chase Elliott gets a lot of the attention, and rightfully so. He was certainly one of the best cars in this race today, but Reddick could have very easily been just as much of a factor in this had things not turned out the way they did. Chase Briscoe finishing in the 9th spot. He was one of the ones coming up through the field there and getting that 2-point advantage over Kyle Larson to make the next round. Remember, Briscoe not too long ago, I mean, just last year, he won Rookie of the Year, but he crashed out in the finale at Phoenix. Lastbro was actually taking some pictures of it from the stands. The 14 car just fell off the tow truck there at the end. Had a lot of bad luck really at that track. I know he won his first Cup race there this year. Maybe that's a sign of things turning around, especially if we're going into Phoenix for the championship finale. Is that going to be helpful to him or not? In 2020, when he was so good in the Xfinity Series, Briscoe was. Couldn't quite have a good enough car, just had had a bad day at the worst possible time, ends up losing the championship. I think it was to Cindric that year. So an unfortunate deal along the way there. Maybe he's looking at, kind of getting back into it and having, being another factor there, especially with his teammates like Kevin Harvick, missing the cut here for this next round, having been eliminated earlier after the round of 16. It's certainly going to be interesting too. Austin Dillon seemed like kind of a dart without feathers. It seemed like most of the wrecks that we saw in the later stages, he was either a part of it or just running through somebody. But him finishing in the 10th spot there, regardless, able to kind of climb back into contention. I was wondering if we were going to end up seeing like some kind of a fight after this race, at least in the short term, but it turned out not to be the case. Eric Jones just outside the top 10. Corey LaJoie in 12th after his scuffle there with Daniel Suarez. I think certainly not anything, deliberate on the part of Suarez there when they made contact in the chicane there on the front stretch. Clearly the 99 had a bucket load of problems after the issues of the steering rack, kept trying to refill the fluid. We saw something similar with Austin Hill in the Xfinity race, although I'm sure the steering setup is entirely different in those cars versus the next gen cars. Unfortunate game of bumper tag there. But LaJoie, I mean, looking at him and this run in particular, he had a good run at Sears Point in 2021. Every once in a while, he kind of works his way back into the picture there. Road courses are, again, kind of in that same category as the super speedways, as opening opportunities for drivers to get good performances. And we've seen the Spire team really turn things around. They were really firmly in command of the NASCAR standings for most of this year, at least in the Owners' Championship. Had a lot of last place finishes, but we talked last week about Landon Castle having a good run at Talladega, and then here with LaJoie getting the 12th place run here at the Roval. I think those are very positive steps forward for that program here, so kudos to them. And finishing ahead of the likes of, you look at some of the other drivers behind him, Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex Jr., Joey Logano, William Byron, some of these other guys, Chase Elliott, other guys further back in the lineup here. But again, mentioning going back to the last place battle here, mentioned Bubba Wallace, other drivers that were at the back of the field, had a couple of exchanges there. Josh Williams had to do a pass through on pit road and was running at the back of the field there. But Daniel Kvyat there in the number 26 car, dropping out after 17 laps with an engine issue. The crew basically took the passenger side window off. Looked like it was maybe going to be an electrical issue, but then ended up pushing the car behind the wall. They reported a loss of oil pressure, and pretty soon after that, they were in the garage. And really well after the finish of the race, their onboard camera was still working. They had people walking back and forth in front of that car pretty much the entire length of the race. We've seen in the short time that we've had these cameras back again, that they usually seem to shut off at the moment the car is kind of rolled up to the truck. I guess they shut off the onboard computers, must be linked to the same thing or whatever. It seems like they still run even when the engine is off, because we've seen that at Talladega when cars are kind of getting towed back to the garage area and the camera is still working. But just kind of understanding this technology a bit more, it was interesting, kind of interesting to see. I was hoping that they'd be able to see them kind of push the car onto the hauler before the end of the race. But Loris Hezemans, their teammate, actually still finished the race under power, 2 laps down in the 33rd spot. I think before that, they were running at least a little bit better than that. I know a lot of the field was on the lead lap until things kind of bubbled over there at the end of the race. But again, given that it's such a new program, much like the money team and everything this year, I think it's just small steps here in trying to get the best runs that they possibly can. Finishing in the 38th spot was Joey Hand. Kudos to NBC for showing the replay there. Apparently a tangle with Austin Cindric coming into the backstretch chicane. Contact was made, steered Hand very hard into the wall with the right front corner of the car. That repair was not able to be completed there with the issue with the toe link that was undoubtedly damaged in that particular incident. Finishes in the 38th position. Ross Chastain and Daniel Suarez, your Trackhouse teammates, are both in the bottom 5. I think that's the first time that has happened all this year. Chastain was your last place finisher in the Daytona 500. I believe Suarez was last at Vegas in the spring. But in terms of having both these drivers struggle at the same time for very different reasons, between the steering issue for Suarez and the right rear toe link issue for Chastain, definitely a devastating double hit there for that program. It's very fortunate that Chastain still had a good enough season that he was able to kind of make the round of 8 here and get on to the next round. So kudos to him. But unfortunately, as the points are indicated at the moment here, Suarez not making the next round and eliminated after just a litany of problems there. And again, I think this is where the battle for last place actually has, again, direct championship implications. If you have a race with very, very low attrition and you have several drivers on the lead lap, it becomes a staring contest. Who's going to blink first? Somebody's going to finish at the back of the field, and things are going to get crazy at the end when people realize, oh, you're 2 points for making your way in, or you're 5 points for making it way in. And then certainly once Christopher Bell had the best tires, somebody who is well below the cut line, really the furthest back other than Bowman, who of course wasn't in the race with the concussion, that completely turned things, up even higher at that point. You can't really fault the drivers for being as aggressive as they were when this race played out there at the finish, I think, because it just bubbled over at that point, and the opportunity presented itself when you stacked everybody up on those restarts. I guess you could look critically at the chain of events that led to this, specifically the sign that was left on the track that drew out the caution. Was that worthy of a yellow? I don't think so. I think that NBC was they were just going to hold that shot until a caution came out. And I know these broadcasters, you could tell, I'm not saying anything new here. You can tell when they're just chomping at the bits, like, boy, if we just get a caution, it's going to be really exciting. This race has been okay, but I know it would be great if we get a caution now and it'll really mess things up. And then, self-fulfilling prophecy, a caution comes out. Would that sign have been a real problem? Maybe. I don't know. If a car spins out on it or something like that. But, I don't know. I wonder if those are set up there deliberately. I know it's probably an easier way it's certainly easier than painting the wall. I get that. Certainly, and I guess if a new sponsor comes on board and they want, to sponsor an entire corner, it'd be easier to just go to the local sign shop and print a bunch of those up and put them up different places. But it seems like they're a convenient way to kind of get a caution at the same time too, versus the very real situation where you actually had a part of the curb come up. And of course, those curbs are made of such heavy duty material that could cause some serious damage for these cars. So I think, that particular caution can't really fault NASCAR at that point. But I think at the same time, there was a lot of restraint that was shown by NASCAR in this one. I think when you had that late restart where Noah Gragson and other drivers were spinning out in the first corner, it was nice that they didn't just throw the caution immediately and completely burn the rest of that lap as everybody else is just kind of tiptoeing their way back to the finish line because, of course, they can't race to the caution. I like that they still showed restraint even after Chase Elliott spun out of the lead, and that it was still going, and that it was really the curb being dislodged and the combination of that and Ty Dillon's car being stalled on the track. It's like, okay, at that point, sure, you're going to throw a caution because at some point that's going to be a real hazard, and they did have to take the time to do that. So, again, I know NASCAR officiating gets plenty of criticism. I know I'm no exception in providing it, but I think there was some positives to kind of glean from that at the same time, especially at a track like this where it's so much of it's purposefully designed to be as chaotic as possible. Clearly having at the time when they introduced this, you had like basically 3 races at Charlotte. You had the All-Star race, you had the 600, and you had the 500-mile race that was in the playoffs. And it's like, do we really have to have this many races at one track? Yes, it's a track that's closest to where all the teams are, and there's always that nice element to it. But does it really need to be 3 different races there with the exact same race and the exact same kind of racing? I think there's been some decent races in the playoff race when it was on the oval, but I don't blame them for trying something new. And it's certainly, you know, at the end of the day, you're trying to get people in the stands. You're trying to get them to see something new. And a lot of good crowd shots here showed, you know, pretty good crowd on hand for this. There's certainly been no shortage of storylines, and adding this extra wrinkle literally to this track, I think has created another opportunity to really see, you know, some of that kind of drama unfold there. But and also brings a different group of drivers to this field. I mean, seeing other road course guys, you know, like Joey Hand and so forth here, and other smaller programs there that wouldn't run the 600. I mean, the money team ran the 600 this year, which is the last time we've really seen them. But I think Kaz Gralla was running it back then. So again, trying to bring different drivers into the mix and bringing road course drivers really to, you know, to an oval track, I think is pretty cool. Kind of reminds me of when I was, you know, seeing old races at Sears Point and wondering why Boris Said and Ron Fellows weren't entered in every race, why they were just unusually different drivers in that sense. So, yeah, kind of a different kind of thing to see. But, yeah, it's going to be interesting. But so yeah, I think it's really kind of interesting to see, you know, how this went. I think there's a lot of positives about this. I don't feel overly, you know, I try to stay mindful of, I know this may not look like it sometimes for those of you who follow my Twitter account here, but I try not to be negative about things all the time on things like that, because like I like to say that I have a pretty good eye when I see what people are trying to do or trying to accomplish. And I think this race is a good, you know, example of that. I think they were trying to, you know, they're trying to let this race play out as naturally as possible. We didn't have any cautions for ridiculous reasons in the first couple stages, and they probably could have. They probably could have thrown a couple more, you know, they being NASCAR in this case. And we saw kind of some interesting strategy. I don't know how compelling it would have been in the stands. I know that would have been a different experience, but I think that's kind of the difference there. But, you know, again, I think regardless of, you know, what kind of racing you like to see, I think you got your money's worth out of this one, whether you like to see chaos or just people just going out there and just flogging these cars out there. And again, I think the mechanical issues, the more benign ones, not issues with fires or concussions or serious impacts like that, but issues where the cars are just falling apart, much like Bristol. I think that makes it really kind of interesting. I hope that's something where, you know, drivers have to really take care of these cars and, you know, and drive them a bit smarter. I think if there's a return to that to an extent, and this car is kind of the gateway to that, I think that's good. But again, it can't be at the cost of safety. It can't be. I think that's completely off the table. And I'm glad that there's been a bit more discussion. Apparently there was a driver safety meeting that was being discussed with NASCAR. There's some PowerPoints being shown. Not exactly sure what the nature of all that was, but at least there's a discussion. At least there's something going on there. So that's good to hear, you know, and what information we're going to hear from this. And, you know, what, you know, it would be great to hear some kind of a timetable of what's going on there. But I think that's going to be another one to certainly look at there too. But I think that'll be another one at the same time. So yeah, but yeah, exactly. I think there were people. I think it was interesting to kind of gauge the reaction on social media for this race, because yeah, you certainly had people that were bored from the first two stages and then throwing up their hands about how crazy it was at the end. It's like, look, you know, these guys are professionals, but they're also put under just a tremendous amount of stress from any number of directions. And it can play, and that can play out completely different in one race or another there. So I think that'll be another one to kind of look at there too. But yeah, again, so kind of interesting situation here. I got questions again about the 26 car finishing in last place. Not the first past Formula One driver to finish in last. Seth Eggert, I know, was asking about that earlier. Obviously, there you think about Juan Pablo Montoya. You also think about Christian Fittipaldi. You think about who actually drove the 43 car briefly in 2003. And then, you know, by extension, there was also a time, not now, where the Indy 500 was considered part of the Formula One World Championship, at least way back in like the 1950s, early 60s. So, you know, technically you had drivers like AJ Foyt, you know, who very well could have been a Formula One World Champion, you know, running those cars as well. But of course, you know, being the multi-time Indy 500 winner that he is, still gets credit for those in the starts. And again, if you look at Racing Reference, you'll kind of see when that pops up in some of those. So drivers with Formula One history, being in your last place finishers in Cup, not entirely unprecedented. I do believe this is almost certainly the first driver born in Russia to be your last place finisher. I think there was already mentioned when he came into the Cup Series earlier this year, what was it, at Watkins Glen and the Indy Road course, where he was brought in on that. So, again, some history there. Again, different countries that are kind of represented there too, which I think kind of makes it interesting. I did the Formula One statistics there for the Formula Last One book that I update on Amazon at the end of each year. I kind of do a ranking by nations, and it's interesting how many countries are represented. And then when new drivers even come in that circuit, they kind of shuffle things up. If you have a guy from Monaco or Singapore or something like that come into the mix, I think that's always really exciting at the same time. And NASCAR, I think, is kind of getting to that point by having all these road course races. I was hoping we'd see the return of Project 91 for this race, too, on the entry list, because I know there were drivers that were expressing a lot of interest after how much fun Kimi Räikkönen had at Watkins Glen, despite a rather unceremonious end to that race earlier this year. I was hoping they'd be back in this show here. Probably weren't, just because they were focusing on getting their two cars through the next round. And that was probably for the best, given how many mechanical issues both those drivers had. So probably was the right decision at the end of the day. But I hope next year it's something that gets expanded a lot more and we see this in the regular season. I would love to see them have one of their entries come out to Sears Point and bring even more of an international focus to that track, because we've had a lot of international drivers come out here over the years, some of them making their first starts, some of them their most recent starts. So I think that's always really exciting. Klaus Groff comes to mind when he was the German driver that was coming up through the circuit and driving for BAM Racing a few years ago. I hope that's something we see more of. A little disappointing to not see him here, but I did like seeing the Team Hesburgh effort out there. I was disappointed to not see them at Sears Point. I'm glad our William Saki was able to cover them when they came out to Road America. Unfortunately, Loris had some struggles there in the 27 car. Yeah, it's good to see these other international programs kind of work their ways into the mix there too. Can you imagine NASCAR at Monaco or Singapore? Yeah, exactly. It could be a different situation like that too. Yeah, you got different last place finishers here too. So it'll be an interesting article. Again, pending results of post-race inspection. But the 26 car also has not finished last in a Cup race since 2014, when Cole Witt, driving the Bully Hill Vineyards car at Watkins Glen, had, I believe it was either a brake issue or a throttle issue into turn one and hit the tire barriers. Fortunately, he was able to climb out okay. Cole was a solid driver. I think that was a driver that probably today maybe would perform a bit better in these cars, maybe versus back then. I think driving for a lot of these smaller organizations like BK Racing and TriStar Motorsports and so forth. He basically stepped away from racing. I think, what was it, 2017, 2018, thereabouts. So that'll be another story. Matthias Ekstrom, Tom Anderson. Yeah, exactly. That's another perfect example of other international drivers coming out here. So that's always been kind of interesting too. But yeah. So anyway, let's go we'll talk about the Xfinity Series Race 2. We got something for show and tell, and we'll do some trivia questions here at the later part of the show tonight, and we'll talk more about this. I know there's no shortage of news stories that were coming up this week. One on Friday that I was definitely getting a bit of traffic about and kind of asking, actually had a pretty good discussion about, was the question of NASCAR versus the Race Team Alliance, and a discussion about, what is going to be the proper way to split up the money that's coming into the sport, that the teams, feel that they should be making more money than they are, that there should be a better split. This is not necessarily a new debate. I think it's just taking on like the next step that we're seeing here. I've been plenty outspoken about the RTA itself and what they've done to completely, forcibly basically restructure the exact team format by creating these charters that on their face aren't worth anything, but now saying that they're worth something by opening this market for them and reducing the field arbitrarily from 43 cars down to basically 36 every week. And that 36 number, remember, isn't a magical number. They basically just picked that number because that was a number of teams that were running full time. So they felt that they were the full time. I believe it was for 3 previous years, which ironically actually excluded the Wood brothers. So that's how flawed that system was to begin with. But they were allowed to do it, and NASCAR, bears some responsibility for allowing that to happen. And perhaps that's where this whole problem is coming about here too. So NASCAR, of course, over the years, has, you can probably go all the way back to the Winston Cup era, that when Winston Cigarettes and RJ Reynolds came into NASCAR, their original plan was to sponsor a team. But the NASCAR convinced them, says, hey, well, we would probably like a title sponsor. If you pay X amount of dollars, we'll do that. And then, of course, that turned out to be tremendously beneficial for the sport. That's, I'm not going to pretend that Winston and the Winston Cup Series was not a tremendous boon to the sport, because it was. But I think the problem was then afterwards, and certainly in the most recent years, how many times do you hear about a brand that's the official blank of NASCAR? This is the official, the official soft drink of NASCAR, the official candy of NASCAR, official this and that. And then, how much of that attention, where NASCAR is now the presenting sponsor of that, has been taken away from the teams. So there's always been a little, it's like, I guess it could be that it trickles down to the different teams in the form of like what the distribution is of the purse or whatnot. But that's going to be a whole different situation, how that plays out. So I think that really these teams have really kind of questioned, why they need to be so dependent on sponsor, why they're constantly pushing these days. And I know that, you really look at the field, and sometimes it's very hard to determine who's in which car, even if they run the same car number all the time. I know that this is maybe not the best example, since Bubba Wallace changed car numbers from the 23 to 45, but I saw some discussions online where they thought that was Daniel Kvyat in the car that was backing up on pit road because his paint scheme looked so much like the number 26 car that Daniel was running, even though he was in the garage area at the time. But of course, it was the Root Insurance car, different paint scheme there. And I mentioned that because now there's no full season sponsors. Now you have a situation where teams, whether big or small, whether it's Hendrick Motorsports or whether it's Live Fast Motorsports or Rick Ware Racing, they actually kind of have to piece things together. Actually, Rick Ware has actually kind of figured out a way to kind of get one of the most constant paint schemes out there in the Nurtec ODT sponsorship that we see on the 51 just about every week. Pretty much them and Denny Hamlin's FedEx sponsorship and things of that nature. Uh-oh, did my camera disconnect? Hang on, folks. Hang on. Is the camera still out? That's not good. I'm in the middle of making a point and it's frozen my face in a bad spot there. Can you guys still see me? I don't know. I don't think you can. You may try to do that. Got a loose wire here. All right. The light is not on, so that's not good. Can we get the camera back on? How about that? Deactivate. Credit one, credit one, bank one to go. Yep, that's no one. Ally in the 48. Yeah, so there's a few. Okay, it says deactivate, but I don't know if it's on. Can you guys see me? I'm not sure. If it's cut out there, definitely tell me, because I don't want that doing that. I was gesticulating too close to this cable here, and I think I knocked something loose. Camera frozen. That's not good. Okay. Let me see if I can do this. Let me try this. Hang on, folks. Okay, there we go. Gosh, okay, I like this. This is better already than the YouTube one. Okay, can you see me now? This is a radio show now. Yeah, exactly. This draws my point to technical issues and why NASCAR needs to solve those. Still froze? Uh-oh, he's still frozen? Okay, I'll wait a second here to see if it's catching up here. Definitely let me know. Let me know if you can see me. Okay, we're back. Okay, cool. All right. I think the chat's just a little behind. Okay, good. People watching this on video on demand are going to have a blast with this one, but that's okay. We'll work our way through it, folks. That's what we do over here. But yes, so we have a situation here with NASCAR taking a lot of these sponsors and then becoming the official brand of NASCAR, the official this, the official that. It takes away from these other teams. And yes, there are examples like, the situations with Alex Bowman and Denny Hamlin and Cody Ware even, but that's not the norm. And the question has been raised, and I think Michael Jordan in particular, and I think this is pretty eye-opening that he would bring this up, think that shouldn't be the business model, that there should be some kind of different system for setting that up there. So, it's like, okay, well, what's the alternative? And I know that it may seem hard to really think about sponsorship not being the business model in racing, that the sponsors get a lot of brand activation. They want to see their logo on the track, and you get the different paint schemes. And there's a great way to, like, especially on social media, there's like whole reveal videos about, we got this new partner and all this, and it's just as big as it ever was. But it's easy to forget that in NASCAR racing, and we talked about this a little bit in the Soapy Castles video, there used to be a time that you didn't have sponsors because you had factory support and you had factory drivers out there. And a lot of times you would have a guy that would go out there and they would just be sponsored by the local dealership. Buddy Arrington was actually kind of to this extent a bit, because of course, he was the only Chrysler guy for a while there too. So you would have factory guys, and you'd have your Petty Enterprises, your Bud Moore, your Wood Brothers, programs like that, and they would just battle for the lead among themselves. And then anybody else that scrapped together a car, they would just be able to get back out there and and do that. So that would be a different situation there at the same time. But I think that that's also a different way that you can kind of look at how this all shakes out here with these different teams, because it could be that we are on the cusp of what is going to be a very different setup there for the. I know, I see it too, folks. I'm trying to click it while I'm making this point here, but it's not letting me do it, and I don't know why that is. But at any rate, what we have here is a different situation with the teams. Exactly, yeah. I'm talking about advertising, and then we get advertisements. I guess that's probably where it goes. Just ignore it, folks. So we have a situation where maybe we're embarking on something different here, where, okay, is there going to be a new business model that is more team-oriented, and you can have these programs out there, and maybe they still carry sponsors, but maybe they're just not as dependent on them. Maybe that's just because the car is out there and it's got some advertising space and you want to have it on there. But maybe it's something where you don't need it necessarily. Just like factory backing is kind of like where it is now. Obviously, you still have Toyota teams, you have Chevy teams, you have Ford teams, and you have some that are better than others that probably get more support or more of the latest support from the manufacturer. But that's another one to kind of look at there too. So I think that's another way to kind of check that out. So I don't know if that's going to be kind of where we're heading with all this, but it's a possibility, certainly. So I think that'll be kind of interesting at the same time there. I know that discussions were about, well, okay, if this doesn't work out, because apparently NASCAR wasn't too happy with the current proposal that was being put forward by the RTA. If they're not happy with that, then okay, what's going to be the proper solution? Like, who's going to what's going to happen at that point? And I still think that the worst case scenario would be a split. And I don't think we're anywhere near that. This may not age well, but I'll go ahead and say it. I don't think that's going to be a situation there. I'm hopeful that NASCAR is going to make changes to this car. I'm sure they, at the very least, don't want the bad public relations of having to deal with all these stories of these drivers having concussions and dropping out of the sport, especially guys that are playoff drivers. Not saying that that's more important than if it was a driver at the back of the field. It would be every bit as important, but I think it just means that it's that much more noticeable of a story, and that much more negative of a story, the way that it's been put out. Those are things that kind of need to be looked at that same point there. But what would be the split then? I mean, okay, if you had the big teams just kind of go and say like, okay, well, we're going to start our own series. Well, they're not going to be able to run at Daytona because NASCAR owns a track. They're not going to be running you can pretty much throw any ISC track out of there. Would SMI try to do something different at that point? I mean, at this point, we're kind of, just doing like a whole game of make-believe it here, because I think we're just going to be so far off the map of what has happened in stock car racing in the past that it would be hard to see. But I think that one thing that could be probably agreed on is, especially after what happened in open wheel racing, I don't think it would be to the benefit of the sport. And I think that NASCAR should really, really try their best to work something out with these teams, because Formula One is closing, because IndyCar is closing. Yes, NASCAR still gets the best ratings, And I know everybody looks at those as closely as like stock reports these days and still sees that number as bigger than the ones for Formula One, or at least here in the US. I can't speak for other countries. But Formula One or IndyCar or sports car racing or drag racing, but a lot of those sports are closing because you got to be so competitive these days. And there's so many more things that people could be watching, whether it's, here on YouTube or, anything else that's out in the world. And I think that that's something that needs to be looked at very seriously. So I'm sure that NASCAR would rather just keep the status quo the same. But it's very possible that things are changing there and that they need to kind of look at that. And I'm hopeful that maybe if things change that way, maybe this whole situation with the charters and stuff, maybe it won't be as necessary, or maybe it'll get to a point where you can get some more teams in the sport. I think anything that's going to encourage growth of the sport or growth of the teams is going to be better. I think the teams are doing the best they can to try to reduce cost as best as possible. You're still going to have top teams and less teams, smaller programs. But I think they've had to jump through a lot of hoops. I mean, think of just the last couple of decades here where they had the original car, or, not the original car, but you go back to the cars before the car of tomorrow, and then you got the car of tomorrow, and then you got changes made to that and changes made to that. And then, the Gen 6 car, and now this new car, and they're constantly hitting the reset button. And then, okay, what are they doing with the old cars? Are they going to end up in ARCA? Or are they going to end up in showrooms or, things of that nature? There's a lot of things that they've had to incur the costs of, while at the same time, the cost of competition to try to stay ahead of everybody else. And then, of course, that's a moving target because, for example, who would have seen that Trackhouse has been just as dominant as they've been this year compared to even just last year when they were starting out. So there's a lot that's going on there, and it's almost, kind of a larger scale version of what the owner drivers faced back in the 1970s and 80s, where they were putting forth the proposal that they just needed a better split of the purse just to keep going, that they couldn't make ends meet. Ultimately, I know DK Ulrich spoke out about this in his interview with the Scene Vault podcast. It ultimately didn't amount to much, but it was something that was still kind of done that was there was at least an altruistic effort to kind of try to bring people in, not a handout, but at least something that kind of takes this, knowing that you have this element there in the sport and trying to kind of keep it going as best you can. Or try to come up with some other financial incentives, incentives to keep drivers out there that are running full time, knowing that, lower funded efforts and higher funded efforts are both going to have that interest to stay out there. There's no perfect solution for it, but I think that's something that NASCAR needs to at least be open to at the same time, because this isn't something new. This is something that it feels new, but that's because it's just called something different versus, changes again in the sponsorship dynamic, factory support, and, all those other aspects from the sports past as well. So that would be another one to kind of look at there at the same time. I haven't talked about the Xfinity race. We'll jump into that at the same time here. Let me get the results of that pulled up here. AJ Allmendinger, of course, the news this week about him going full-time in the Cup Series again this year. I think that's very exciting. I know that obviously he's, of course, looking forward to all the road courses, which he's already been doing. And no doubt he's going to be just as good at those next year as he's been this year. I think that'll be another thing to kind of look at. But he's had some good runs at the ovals, too. I believe at Bristol this year, with as much craziness that happened there, he had a good finish. It would be great to see him back. It's been, 5 years since he's been full-time, back when he was driving for JTG, Daugherty Racing, like in 2018. So him getting back into the series full-time and trying some of these tracks, going for, Daytona 500 wins, especially with the colleague effort that has been so good on the super speedways, and with Allmendinger himself now finally winning an Xfinity race on a super speedway. Maybe that was another factor in this decision. That's great. I think that's another thing that I've always talked about with the Xfinity Series that should stay the same, is the opportunity for a driver that maybe if they lose a Cup ride or even a Cup charter, in the case of today's business model, they get down to the Xfinity Series, they kind of hone their skills a little bit. If they find out that it's just not for them, they get a different, role in the sport, so be it. Justin Marks has certainly had that work out great for him. But if in the case you're a guy like AJ Allmendinger, and you get, you start becoming a winner and a championship contender in Xfinity, and you get back into the Cup Series with like a renewed sense of purpose with a whole different organization behind you, that's great. That should be something that's allowed. I keep waiting for that to happen with Justin Allgaier now over at JR Motorsports, and them trying to get up there. I know the junior is chomping at the bit to try to get that program up there, no doubt. It's kind of bizarre that the current paradigm has set it up to the point where you have to have Noah Gragson drive for Petty GMS. Not to say it's a bad team. They've certainly come out strong this year, even right from the get-go, even before you had the situation with Eric Jones winning at Darlington. They were having a good run all the way back at Fontana back in February and really showing a different principle in what this team could accomplish. But I'm sure Junior Motorsports, if they'd like to kind of hang on to their drivers and grow their program around it to get into the Cup Series. Maybe about 10 years ago, they would have been able to do that and just move right up there. It's like, okay, now we're just doing Cup cars. That's what happened with DEI. That's what happened with, several other organizations. But nowadays with that charter, it's that glass ceiling again. You just can't get it up there. And that's going to be kind of the problem for these guys. So hopefully that changes. I think that would be a different way to look at it there too. But I think that would be another one that has to be kind of considered. But talking about the Xfinity race here, A.J. Allmendinger remains perfect in the Xfinity race at the Charlotte Roval. What was his fourth consecutive victory there? Outstanding. Even in a race where he wasn't particularly the best driver. I know he led the most laps, but it seemed like Ty Gibbs and Noah Gragson and those guys were all really kind of in the mix there just as much as he was. It was certainly not easy, as the results may seem to indicate. But a great run for him there. Gragson coming from the back of the field in a backup car to finishing in the third spot. Remarkable run for him. Alex Labay in the sixth position there, the Can-Am car. One of his best tracks. I think this is the site of his only top 5 back in 2020. Finishing in the 6th spot is great for him. Landon Castle there in the top 10. Ryan Sieg so close to getting in. He was a real heartbreaker from this particular race here. I know that he had to fight and claw for every position at Bristol just to make the playoff cutoff. Makes it to this round, gets some great points there in these last couple of races here, kind of missing some of the bigger wrecks. And I guess Talladega didn't have it because he had everybody finishing under power, but trying to get the most points you possibly could. And then just coming up just a couple points short here of catching Josh Berry and Brandon Jones at the finish of this one. But still, I think they have a lot to be proud of. Much like with Jeremy Clements and, these other teams that have kind of worked their way into playoff contention. Sometimes you got to lose one in order to win one. Still now, I think at this point, of course, Sieg's focus is going to be just on checkers or wreckers, just try to get that win at all costs. Still waiting to get his first victory. We got Clements now as 2. So you got like other drivers in similar positions here. Obviously different manufacturers, different backing and so forth. But I tend to kind of lump them in the same group there of like underdog organizations that have really tried to kind of get their feet under them. And, Sieg Watch continues, I guess. That's going to be the wait and Sieg, I guess, is going to be the tagline on that one. But Daniel Kvyat, after his last place run today, had a great run in that Xfinity race, finishing in the 15th spot. That's something I definitely wanted to kind of feature again in the Cup Series article here. Great performance for him, for the Sam Hunt team. His first ever Xfinity start. Remember, this guy only made 2 Cup starts earlier this year, no Truck Series starts, and had been out of Formula One. So you got that. And then, I don't know if the language barrier is in effect or anything like that. I know that Williams said that was a bit of an issue with Loris Hezemans at Road America. But, regardless, I think that's a fantastic run out of the 26 team there. I believe it's tied for like the, I think only like 15 out of like 74 starts out of that team's had that are actually finished, that were actually better finishes than what Daniel did in this particular start. So that's fantastic for him. I think that's a good showing out of that program. A couple heartbreakers, though, at the same time. Sage Karam and Stephen Parsons, both of them really had great shots at top 5s. Been singing the praises of Parsons here for several weeks here now. It seems like every week he's either having a career best run or very close to getting something even better. Had a great run at Watkins Glen a few weeks ago, breaking through to a top 5 here. Very close to it. Running in the 5th spot here at the end of this race, ends up getting spun out, drops back over into the 25th spot. Sage Karam, yes, I know he had the bit of the tangle out there. with Sheldon Creed. Creed was none too happy about that. But regardless, that only happened because Karam was basically running between third and fourth for a long part of this race, which is a very challenging race to actually kind of defend a position on with as many restarts as they had. It was a much more chaotic race than what we saw in the Cup Series race, at least the first 2/3 of the Cup race today. Certainly not the end of the third stage. Yeah, I think we had a couple drivers that really could potentially be factors and kind of, play an interesting role in the finish of it. It just turned out very differently for both of those drivers. Preston Pardus at the same time had a spin down the back straightaway, finished in the 21st spot. I keep waiting for him to get another top 5 run out here. Another great run. I know being a past Spec Miata driver, him running against Brad Perez in this race is actually pretty cool in that sense, with both of them having similar backgrounds there. But both of them finishing, unfortunately, a bit further back in the lineup. Perez had some contact out there that tore up the rear end of his car and finished back in the order, showing him in the 23rd spot. It's actually just 2 spots behind Pardus. So a decent recovery, actually, for that. Further back, Austin Hill, talking about the power steering issue that we saw from the Cup Series teams today. Hill's team seemed like on every single stop of that race, we're topping off the power steering pump there and getting him back out there. Still finished in the 29th spot there at the same time. Riley Herbst was the other big heartbreaker in terms of playoff elimination. Seemed to be just the wrong place at the wrong time for multiple accidents out there. The car eventually just said no more. The nose of the car was just completely shoved in. He ends up having to settle for a 32nd place finish there and out of championship contention. Unfortunate deal there for the 98 team. But it's definitely something that's going to be that much more interesting when we come down to the stretch here. But yeah, other drivers that able to kind of recover from things too. JJ Yaley, a solid top 20 finish after spinning out when they were showing the onboard camera there, finishing in the 19th position. But regardless, you got your own playoff contenders here coming to the next round here. So let's see other drivers further back in the lineup. Yes. Chris Wright, your last place finisher. Got to talk about this. Chris Wright with a very hard hit. Actually, it was kind of startling there. I'm glad he was able to at least drive the car for a bit and get back out of the car there. Chris had a transmission issue. They switched transmissions during the weekend. We're at the back of the field there. Came back out there in the 68 car and basically hit that turn 1 barrier right at the point, right at a curb there. And it seemed to deflect that car so quickly, which was pretty alarming. But I'm glad to see he got out of that one okay, at least from the reports that we heard from that one. So, kudos to him. I know there's mixed feelings about it because, of course, Brandon Brown ran his last race with that 68 car last week. Things could have turned out differently. They've just been snake bit this whole year. Everything that's happened ever since Talladega last fall, ironically, after his first win, sponsors that have come and gone, which is the same problem that they had before that first win. And then ultimately to the point where he's now had to drive for BJ McLeod and Mike Harmon. Thankful that he's had the opportunity to drive for anybody at this point. But not being able to work with his family's team, that's got to be something very bothersome for him. I know he's trying to make ends meet, just like the team is. Chris Wright, again, I know as a driver that's still very new to the sport. Actually, I kind of had fun writing Wright's story because I don't feel like it's been captured very well. I know he struggled a lot, the Truck Series and Xfinity. I didn't shy away from that and writing that piece there too. He lost his ride with Nice Motorsports earlier this year. Basically, they parted ways. They just haven't had some very good runs out there trying to make things work in the Xfinity Series. I don't know if it's going to work out for a full-time effort. They certainly can't afford to keep tearing up cars. But that's going to be another thing to kind of look at there too. Unfortunately, it's with some, another reality of the sport, even in the Xfinity Series, which I still believe has a better business model for the teams than the Cup Series currently does. That's still possible at the same time there too. So hopefully things shake out for him. It sounds like he's going to be running that car at least the rest of this year. I know he signed for 9 races back in August, and they were kind of switching off with Brandon. I don't know if that's changing with any other driver, because I know Brandon, like I said, was running his last race with the team last week at Talladega. We'll see if that changes down the stretch here. Marco Andretti on the same note. It was really cool to see him NASCAR's top 3 series. He drove for the Big Machine team, which really came into this race flying high. Parker Kligerman with his great run at Talladega, Nick Sanchez with his great run at Texas, really came in with a lot of confidence. And really cool to get Marco Andretti, the SRX champion this year, not to mention, of course, generations of open wheel history with his family, getting into the NASCAR. I hope he makes some more starts. Sounds like he was pretty positive about it. I know he hurt his wrist a bit in the incident there with Jeb Burton. But again, I hope he tries some oval races too, not just limited to the road courses there, and sees what he can do. As much as I'm still not happy about what happened with Jade Buford earlier this year and being left behind there by the 48 team, I still don't like that they did a lot with these different Cup guys in there, but I like that they've kind of turned the corner now. And in these final few rounds, even when you have playoffs going on, they're really taking a chance on other drivers, really trying to kind of give them the opportunity to get a race out there. And I think even in the Xfinity Series, when it's still a really high level series and you got a lot of people that have Cup ambitions very much on their minds, it's good to see that there's still teams that leave open opportunities for other drivers to kind of get their shots. We've seen this out of Alpha Prime. We see this out of BJ McLeod's team, Mike Harmon's team. And it's good to count Big Machine Racing in that same group there, because I think they're a good group of guys and they got a good background in sports car racing, and which I think is very conducive to kind of the direction the sport's been taking with their increased focus on road course racing and so forth there too. So I think that's also very positive. But we'll see if that's going to continue. I don't know who their entry is going to be for Vegas this week. We'll find out. We're going to find out very much in person, because that's going to be the site of our next trackside coverage for LastCar.info. Myself and LastBro are going to be heading down there on Thursday morning, and we're going to check out the action there for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I don't really have too much planned for the Arca Menards West race, but do plan on checking that out for sure. But then, of course, the big features will be still with the Xfinity Series and the Cup Series action this weekend on that. And actually, on that same note, I'll go ahead and jump into this here, even though it's more for... Is there an Andretti in this? Oh, gosh, yeah. I think they mentioned somebody from that, too, Snot Slinger. You had a different driver in that situation, but yeah. So at any rate, let me see. I know I watched a Rally World Challenge race. It was something at Sears Point. I know there's another Andretti in that, but you're right about that, Snot Slinger. The name's escaping me, but I'm sure somebody in chat's going to remember it for sure here too. Let's see here. Alrighty. Yes. So for the show and tell segment, we'll jump ahead a little bit in this. I know I usually do it before our trivia segment, but in anticipation of Las Vegas, we do have the magnet. The magnet has come in. So for those of you who don't know, who haven't from this, I do order a new one of these door magnets before each of our trackside coverages, and it has the names of everybody in the Patreon currently. So we get all of these printed out here each year. If anybody's interested in joining the Patreon, any level on that, patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock. Between now and the conclusion of the Vegas race this Sunday, I'll write your name in on here. And of course, that's significant, not just for being able to ride along with us here. We'll take some pictures of the magnet on our trip on over there and kind of follow along with our journey down south. But you'll also be entered in a drawing to win this magnet too. We've given away, I think, about a half dozen of these at this point now, and it's always something to look forward to doing each year. We already have the one for Phoenix set up too. So if you sign up for this one, you'll already be on the Phoenix one too. So there's another bonus, and being involved in that. I'll reveal that one when we get close to our Phoenix coverage at the beginning of November. I think you'll like that one very much as well. You'll notice on this design, I actually did this last year too. With the Dan Weldon tribute here, the number 77 and kind of the black and white pattern. Did something a little bit different with the color scheme this year, but still wanted to kind of add that on there, not just with doing the Until Lap 11 video last season, but also because this race happens to actually fall, the Cup race happens to fall on October 16th, which is exactly the date of that particular race here. So I figured that would be something to kind of tie in for the magnet design this time around. So yeah, thank you very much to everyone that's in the Patreon, patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock. If you're interested, get advanced access to videos that both myself and NASCAR Man put together. And I got some more content coming up on that too. Still looking to get some more bonus content for other members. If you're in the $10 level, you get access to those. You also get some neat swag. I got stickers and stuff that I mail out, newsletters. I got to put a new one of those together. Probably do that after the season's wrapped up, since we're just down to the last couple of weeks anyway, and we'll kind of wrap up everything that happened this year. I love kind of putting that stuff together, and I think that'll be cool too. So definitely stay tuned for more of that. Still some more work done on the next video that's going to be on this channel here. As I mentioned on Twitter, and again, I want to kind of spread the word about that. The Stanton Barrett video is still postponed indefinitely at this point. I need to get a follow-up interview with him, and we're going to do some kind of rewrites of it. And I think at the end of that, it's going to be a much better video there at that point. I don't have a time frame for it, but, and I teased this last week, again, the next video talking about Speed Weeks 2001 and kind of adding more context to what happened in the lead up to that race. That is going to be the next big project here. And I've been working on that this week. Actually made some very good progress on that. All 3 parts of it. And yes, it is going to be a 3-parter. And yes, I do plan on releasing all 3 parts. I plan on making all 3 parts available to the Patreon at the same time, but I'm going to release them probably on consecutive weeks when it originally comes out. And then the reason for that will become very clear, because I think they're going to be rather lengthy episodes, and I think it'd be too much to have everybody sit through a premiere. This could be too long, especially for a subject matter like this. I think it's going to be better to break things down a little bit more there. So that's something I'm going to kind of juggling in between the trackside coverage we're doing for Las Vegas this next week and Phoenix in a couple of weeks here. So a lot of content coming up here in the near future. This on top of course, the Derek Cope book. We're working on getting that ready to submit to the editor and get that off the desk too. So that'll be great. Anything that's more that we can get to, something for everybody to check out. That'll be something else to look at for everybody too. So let's see. Oh yes, let me get on the super chats here too. Thank you so much for these at the same time. Bowser Jr. XD, let me get to yours here first. The Xfinity race had a margin of 0.582 seconds, which is the 1,112th closest finish and ties with the 2013 Cup Loudon race. And it's the second closest Roval race to 2020. So thank you very much, Bowser Jr. Again, I think you should have a good website there to put that together. And I see your other one here as well. For the Cup race at a margin of 1.79 seconds, the 1,998th closest finish ties with the 1994 Fall Richmond Cup race and the 2009 truck race at Michigan. So again, I love something that kind of reconfigures history in your mind, and you kind of think about that finish, or if a race stands out in your mind, and then you figure the race we just saw today or the race we saw yesterday had that in common at the very least, had that kind of margin of victory. So yeah, kudos to you, Bowser Jr. XD, and thank you very much for the super chats on that as well. Michael Jensen, thank you for your super chat. The charters go for $20 million now. Does NASCAR have $720 million to buy them out from teams? If not, the owners will never let NASCAR get rid of the charter system. Very good point. Very good point. You know, it's hard to tell, and that's definitely going to be a factor in the charter thing. That's the other reason I'm not crazy about it, is what can be done at this point. They've created this box for them. And yeah, none of these teams in their right mind are going to give up one of these charters because now they're basically given an asset that is now worth X amount of dollars. And there's no oversight. There's no cap for how much they're worth. They're worth whatever anybody else is willing to pay for them. And if somebody wants to get out of the sport, it gives them a wonderful parachute to just get out of it and get, you know, I don't know if it's a windfall, but it's certainly more than, you know, what do we always hear? Oh, it's not enough to sell the team and sell the cars. That's not worth anything. It's like, well, it's not worth pennies either. Like, okay, like, I mean, and that's been the case since, you know, the very beginning of the sport. You've had teams that have closed up and had to sell their equipment and sell that before, and it's terrible. But this has not been any kind of solution for that. Talk to the people at Germain Racing, talk to the people at Levine Family Racing or H. Scott Motorsports, teams that have closed up since the charter team has started up there. That's the problem. But you're absolutely right, Michael. I mean, that's going to be the thing. You know, NASCAR is not, you know, they're not going to, you know, I don't even know if they could even set a number on him. If it's $20 million, that's what other teams are asking for it now. Is that going to even be enough for, them to give them up to NASCAR? Are they going to take $20 million from NASCAR in a lump sum or whatever the business model is or whatever the situation is in exchange for not having that asset? I'm not sure if they're going to. But again, it's just stymied growth in the Cup Series, which is absolutely not what they need. They need to have as many teams in there as possible trying to qualify for these races. And you want to encourage people to make the jump. And when Dale Jr. can't make the jump, you have a serious problem. If you can't even let people in that you want to let in. So it's and that's the unfortunate part of it there. But I agree, that's absolutely part of the problem. So I thank you for mentioning that. Beast of Metal, thank you for your super chat as well. Thoughts on the appeals panel rescinding the points portion of William Byron's penalty for the Texas incident with Denny Hamlin? Just strange and unfortunate. That whole incident is just bizarre. I do think NASCAR had to do something when they completely flubbed the call on the William Byron and Denny Hamlin thing, when instantly everybody's queuing up the video from their own onboard cameras. Reminds me of some other controversy that landmine that NASCAR stepped in, very similar to this. But in this particular case here, they had to do something. Do I think it rose to the level of X number of points and, money and everything to penalize them? That's where it's a little bit tricky. I think 25 was a bit heavy at the beginning. So probably kind of agree with them rescinding it. But all I can think is like, man, I just wish they just kind of made the call when they should have and just sent them to the back of the line, and then they recovered whatever positions they got at the time. That would have been the most equitable thing. But obviously that wasn't going to be possible with the situation that they kind of created for themselves in that. I'm not sure if I agree with them eliminating the points penalty and then increasing the monetary fine. I don't know if that does anything really to offset what happened at that point. I'm not sure if this was even something that egregious. I think if there's going to be, I think if you're going to have the fine, I think the fine that was incurred on Ty Gibbs was more fitting for seriously endangering those crew members at Texas. I think that was much more willing. I'm glad that they didn't budge on that. I think that would have been more troubling. So I think it's just sloppy. And it's really messy given that it was going into the Roval and it fundamentally changed what William Byron was racing for in the playoffs. I think it points to another flaw just in this playoff system, that you can immediately eliminate somebody or put them back into contention that easily. It's just unfortunate. And I know the same thing could probably be said, but from Byron spinning Hamlin to begin with. But what's really to blame for this? It's like, this is the format that they put all these drivers into, and this is what the situation is. So, I don't know. I mean, I hope it's not the precedent. I hope it means that they're going to be much more on top of these things when they happen. I think actually the fact that their response to Austin Dillon's thing today, where he had the stop and go penalty on the track, and that they concluded that he didn't stop fully. He did like a Hollywood stop on the front straightaway, and then they forced him to do a pass through. I know that seems petty, but to me, that indicates that they're stepping up their vigilance a little bit. That they went back, clearly they went back to tape and they looked at that and then said, oh, okay, well, wait a minute. That really wasn't a full stop. We got to make sure you do that. And as long as they're making that clear in the drivers' meeting that that's a possibility, I say that's fair game. So I think the best that you can do is look forward. Because I think unfortunately the whole situation with Byron and Hamlin was just mishandled. And I don't think their rescinding of the penalty has done anything to fix that. And the real problem is there really is nothing that can fix that. Luckily they were able to settle it on the track. Yes, Byron was put in a much better position than he would have been had it still been there, but at least they had that opportunity. And the race was so crazy at the end of it anyway, and Byron was one of the cars that was spinning out at the end of it, that I'm not sure if that was going to be too much more of, I don't know if that, offset it. I don't know if that really was, it came out. I think it's almost a netted result. It almost just kind of came out in the wash. So yeah, it could have been done better, but the way it was, I think that's about the best you could hope for. It's just unfortunate because it does have that semblance of impropriety to it. Which brings me to the other controversy. Actually, it's good you bring this up too, Beast of Metal, because the situation with Kevin Harvick this week, I know got a lot of skepticism. And I know there were some people that were pointing this out and saying, oh, the conspiracy theorists are out. Oh, the conspiracy theorists. It's like, people got to be very careful to throw that label around, because sometimes when something smells wrong or something just seems like it maybe could be explained as something that's kind of being done deliberately, sometimes it really is done deliberately. I'm not sure in this particular case with Harvick's car and this penalty that where they dropped the hammer on him from Talladega for something with the rear deck lid, if that really was something deliberate, given Harvick's very outspoken nature of it. I know Steve Phelps was very vocal in his response to it, and I think that understandably needs to be taken into consideration. But I think my concern much more than this specific instance is the disregard, the not allowing people to think. It's like, let people chew it over. Don't just immediately say, oh, it's a conspiracy theory. Don't even question it. Don't even question it. Look, I think that kind of mentality is probably a big reason why this car is so much of a mistake, and why Kurt Busch and Alex Bowman aren't running out there, is probably because, oh, dummies were killed during this test. Oh, don't listen. That's a conspiracy theory. It's like, no. Hang on. Think a little bit. Just think just a little bit. At least consider the possibility. And then if it turns out that, yeah, it is something that you don't have any basis in fact, then okay, then you can dismiss it at that point. But I don't think there should ever be a time where you discourage people from thinking about a possibility. Yeah, you don't want people to just run with it. You don't want people to pick up with it and say, oh, it absolutely was something that was retribution for Harvick, and we should just conclude that, print it, put it out there. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you should at least be allowed to chew it over. I know that social media doesn't really encourage that, but I think that's one thing that I would glean from that. I would be surprised if what Harvick was saying about this car had no effect on NASCAR. I'm sure it had some effect. I think the question that we're all having is, what effect is that? And again, goes full circle back to what is being done about this car, what they're proposing to do, and what the timeline is for getting that completed. That's going to be the big question there too. So I think that's the other part of it. So, yeah, that's kind of where I am with on that. So, it's unfortunate. And I think in this particular case, I mean, they have to be aware, of the optics of this too, where the issue that I took with it, particularly when it first happened, mentioning Harvick's penalty again, was that it was regarding the rear of the car. And my first thought was, okay, well, yeah, it turns out it's the rear deck lid, and it was a Talladega, but were they trying a solution? Were the teams trying to come up with a solution to maybe negate some of the impacts that happen with these cars? Was something happening there? Again, it's like, if the teams are going to have to be relied on to help NASCAR with this solution of what it needs to be changed with the car. NASCAR, I don't believe, is going to be entirely capable of doing it on their own. They need the teams to help them. So I don't think it's positive to really come down on them this hard at the end of the year, especially when it's a driver that's already eliminated from the playoffs. It's not like this is going to have an immediate effect on the championship and it's going to sully that. I get that. If it were a playoff driver, if it were like Denny Hamlin in this situation, I probably, even though Hamlin himself has been very outspoken on it, I'd probably be less critical of it, because in that case, Hamlin is in the playoffs and they're going to look at these cars a lot closer. I'd be like, okay, well, they looked at the car closer and they found something that maybe, they would have missed in that case. But with Harvick's case, where not only he's eliminated from the playoffs, but he was like a lap down way at the back of the field at Talladega. I'm not sure if that would have been, it didn't smell right. Now it's entirely possible that, yeah, it was completely legitimate, but the timing is bad. And, again, it's public relations in anything here. And I'm sure NASCAR was cognizant of that, and they probably would have rather not had to engage Harvick in any other way with this going on, because it's certainly, if there's if there's half as much tension between NASCAR and the teams as it's kind of made, appeared to be in recent weeks, I think that was something that didn't need to be riled up anymore. For a guy that, again, isn't in playoff contention at all and wasn't in contention for the win. That's kind of a different situation, but who knows? But I get it's a different situation there too. But But yeah, it's, but people are people. And I see your point there too, David Wilmot's Ghost. You're bringing up Pockrass's tweet about people holding grudges and paying you back. Well, we certainly see that from the drivers, and people are just human. I mean, that's the other thing too. We need to allow for human fallibility a little bit here too, folks. Like, people can maybe make bad decisions, or do something in the instant that is actually counterproductive to their own interests. It is possible. People aren't perfect. Anybody, I mean, you, me, anybody else out there. So I think that possibility is always going to be, out there one point or another. So, and again, I think that's a point towards being a little bit skeptical. I don't think there's anything wrong with being skeptical. I think the problem is running with it and declaring it to immediately be a fact. It's like, well, let's look at it a little bit. Let's look at it. Let's pump the brakes a little bit and kind of figure out what's going on. Because I think that's the most dangerous thing, is when you just kind of sail full speed into something and you don't know what's going on. I think that's much more dangerous, because that's when something happens where, you're overlooked warnings or something like that. That's where that needs to be. I don't want to go too far down the road, because I think we're getting past the subject of NASCAR itself, really. But that's kind of another look at that too. So let's see here. We talked about the Xfinity race. Yeah, we talked about some of the other drivers at the back of the field. Sage Karam finishing 30th after his incident. Yeah, I think that's most of that. So if you guys have any other questions or anything else on news stories, I know there's been a lot this week. Seems like it's been a pretty busy week. Let me check my notes too. If there's anything else that I haven't hit on here, I haven't discussed. Yeah, from that. The guy spray painting NASCAR on USA on the sidewalk in Greenville. I had a note about that. That was just weird. I don't know. I'm still wondering if that's like a guerrilla advertising campaign that USA put together. That seems a little too convenient. Like, maybe there's going to be a promo that we're going to see for Phoenix, and it's going to just show those shots on the sidewalk. It's like, well, we wanted to use that. I'm thinking, because it doesn't seem like that out of the ordinary. I actually had, here's a little slice of life thing here. We get like advertising faxes before, where we receive like these faxes, and it's like, it's like for this company or that company. It's like, why are we getting these? And I actually called back one of these companies. I was wondering why we get these. And basically what the person told me is they got a job on Craigslist where they basically signed up for this job, and they were given a whole list of numbers and just told to fax it to these numbers. And it's like, well, okay, I don't know if that was what was happening in Greenville or not, but maybe that was something else going on there too. But that kind of stuck with me, because it's like, man, that's ridiculous. But I know telemarketers exist, but I guess faxers are the same thing too. I don't know if it would go to the same extent there, but that'd be another one to look at. Let's see. I saw somebody make a comment here about stickers. Where was that on here? Yeah, here we go. RD Fox 76, your comment. That'd be a neat idea. Give each year's NASCAR champion in each series a set of contingency decals they could run to celebrate it. It would probably get a good laugh or two. That's not a bad idea. That's not a bad idea. I from an anonymous contributor, I actually received some of the checkered flag stickers I think that wasn't last year at Phoenix. It was the year before. No, not the year before. It would have to have been 2019. But I gave those out with the certificates that year. But they were just like, generic checkered flag ones. But yeah, we got that. And that was kind of cool. I don't know if the drivers noticed it as much, so I don't know if that would work. But I kind of like the idea. But the kind of in the pinch of the moment, the certificate, and especially laminating the certificate, I think that was the biggest step that we've had with those. Really made it easier to distribute them, make sure they don't get messed up in my backpack or something when I'm carrying them around, or my computer bag or wherever I have them at the time. That is something that is going to be coming back this year, by the way. I am planning on doing the NASCAR certificates for the Cup, Xfinity, and Truck Series. Truck Series is coming back. I saw this asked earlier. Truck Series is coming back at Homestead in a couple weeks here, which is actually the first time trucks have run Homestead since 2020, when Bryant Barnhill was your last place finisher. So kind of an unusual thing in that aspect there too. So that'll be another story coming up. But we'll have who are our front runners here for the NASCAR championships. Let's kind of go over that a little bit to kind of give you an idea of where everything is. Coming out of yesterday's race, Brennan Poole is still the leader in the NASCAR Xfinity Series standings by a single bottom 5 finish over Jeb Burton. And then Raja Karuth also has 2 last place finishes, but it's only out of 2 starts. So I'm not expecting him to contend there. So it may come down to Burton versus Poole. Burton has kind of struggled down the stretch here in the 27, although he did recover quite nicely after the incident with Marco Andretti in yesterday's race to kind of offset that. Brennan Poole on their situation is going to be just a matter of qualifying for races, missing races in the 47, and now trying to get Jimmy Means' team in there. He's just been working so hard to try to kind of elevate these programs and get them back out there. I don't know if Jimmy's team's going to attempt any more races this year. I'm sure they looked at doing the Roval since it was pretty close to their shop, but unfortunately still missed the show in this case here. But Poole is definitely one to look at here coming up. On the Cup Series side, coming into today's race, BJ McLeod is a leader, is the only driver with 4 last place finishes this season. Corey LaJoie with 2. He's one of actually, it looks like 5 drivers with 2 last place runs, joining Kyle Busch, Kyle Larson, Ty Gibbs, and Austin Cindric. Obviously today with Daniel Kvyat having his first last place run, he's not in the direct contention there to affect that outcome. But we'll see how that kind of shakes out. Cody Ware does not have a last place finish this year. He does have 10 bottom 5s and 17 bottom 10s, which if he had 1 last place finish would put him into a 7th place ranking here, or at least like 7th or 8th place in the rankings. And if he had 2 last place runs, it would put him into pretty much a challenge for 2nd against Corey LaJoie. But actually, again, Cody, I know he's been out of the race this past week here, really trying to get the best runs they can get out of the 51. The 51's kind of become the flagship entry out of the Rick Ware stables, whereas the 15's kind of had a rotating series of drivers, Joey Hand, of course, being in the car today. But BJ McLeod looking like the favorite. I mean, again, 2 last place finish gap with 4 races to go on the Cup Series side. It's going to be a challenge. I mean, Corey LaJoie in particular could jump back up there, but like we talked about earlier in the show, Spire Motorsports really seems like it's turning the corner. And I know it was a frustrating day for the 7 team, but they churned out a pretty good finish in spite of all of that. Maybe they can kind of continue to do that here in these next few rounds. We'll certainly follow up on that. In the Truck Series standings, the lead continues to be a tie on that one between Dean Thompson and Spencer Boyd. Thompson just took the top spot back at Talladega with his 11th bottom 10 finish of the year. Spencer Boyd is 2nd. These are the only 2 drivers this year with 2 last place finishes, almost similar to last year where we had almost the entire season without a single repeat last placer. That's not the case this year with 2 drivers with 2 last place runs, but both of them with 2 last place finishes, 6 bottom 5 finishes, and Thompson back in the lead over Boyd by a single bottom 10 run. So whether it's going to be the 40 or it's going to be the 12 or it's going to be somebody else that's working their way up there. Haley Deegan, who's going to make her Xfinity Series debut this weekend for SS Greenlight Racing. She's ranked 3rd overall in the NASCAR Truck Series standings with 1 last place finish, 5 bottom 5s, and 8 bottom 10 runs there. So whether or not she's still a factor coming down the stretch, that could be determinant there. But obviously, if she's still that gap behind going into Phoenix, Homestead's going to really be the factor on that one. She could be eliminated from contention because if she gets the 2nd last place run, she'd still lose on the bottom 10 tiebreaker, and it'll be down to Boyd and Thompson. So going to be some pretty close battles here. Again, Xfinity and trucks are very, very close in that sense. Cup Series is a little bit of a runaway with McLeod, although McLeod, has kind of had different drivers in his car too, which could be a factor. Josh Williams was in the car today to run double duty in the 78, but that's another one to kind of look at. But that's kind of our situation for our certificates this year. And those are the potential names that are on that. And what I'll do is if I print, what'll likely be this case there is maybe not in the Cup Series, but in these other series here, we'll have some other drivers that are potentially eligible for that. Any of the extra certificates, I'll probably auction those off on eBay if you guys are interested as well. That seemed very popular last year. And if anybody's interested, we'll have those too. So that'll be interesting at the same time. So let's see here. Oh, Pedro Fluffington, you're going to be at the Vegas race. Right on, man. Hope to see you out there. I don't know if I'm gonna do like a meetup or something like that. I've tried that. I did that at Vegas last year, and we had a few people show up there, but I always seem to just run into people just walking around. So I just try to make myself as conspicuous as possible. I still wear the white hat, and I got the blue shoes from earlier, and I've got my black shirt and the black pants and all that. And the uniform is very much going to be the same there. So yeah, if you see me at the track there, and for either of these, definitely say hey, and we'll go from there. I got some yeah, interesting NASCAR news coming up, and it's always great to meet with viewers at the track there. I know seems like it's been forever since Sears Point this year. I know that was a blast this season, but very anxious to get back to the track there at the same time. Andrew Bremner, according to Pockrass, NASCAR is reviewing something involving the 41. Probably the fact that he held up traffic there for Briscoe to get ahead, which kind of wasn't necessary. Because at that point, if I remember correctly, Briscoe was actually tied and had the lead in the tiebreaker for that. So I'll be curious if they do more with that. Hopefully they don't, because again, the 2 points were just kind of extra. He didn't need those 2 points to make the cut, but we'll see if something shakes out. I don't think that elevates to the level of the itchy arm and everything that happened back then, but we'll see. Snotslinger, your question, most last place finishes or lowest points at the end of the season? The answer is it's most last place finishes. What I do is I don't want to hand a certificate to somebody who only made a couple of starts, but maybe finished last in one of those 2 starts. I'd rather avoid that situation if possible. What I prefer it to be somebody that's a full-time driver, so it's a whole season of stories if it's possible. We've had part-time drivers win it before, but it's very unusual. They would have to have a ton of last place runs compared to the full-timers, and that's very unusual in that sense. But yeah, to kind of answer your question, that's the thing. And the tiebreakers, the bottom 5s, the bottom 10s, that's again geared towards, again, drivers that have started more races. It basically comes to more starts to split that up too. And that's kind of been the thing. It's probably a more efficient way of doing it, but that's kind of the way I've set it up really in the past here with the website. So that's got it. Let's see. Yeah, and I do, RD Fox 76 is right. Yeah, I do have a breakdown of how I define a last place finisher too. That came up in discussion with a few people too, because I know some people define last place finisher in the Formula One sense, where it's the last car running under power. Mine has always been the first car out of the race. I think that's the easiest way to do it. You look at the results. There's NASCAR, they classify who's in the last position, and that's always been the case. Even if it's just like back in the day when they didn't know who ran in last, they just kind of figured out like, okay, here's the ones that got like $5, got a tow money way back in like the 50s. They just figured, okay, here's the names and here they are, and it's just in whatever order. Those are still last place finishers. So that's kind of where that all shakes out. So we'll see how that goes. Yep, we're still having trivia. Yes, we are. So we already did the show and tell, so we'll jump into that here, and we'll do that. I think that's all the notes I had on this, and we'll jump into that. So do we have a call on inspection as well? I didn't see the, I guess I'll check Pockrass's thing for the situation on that. NASCAR. Okay, here's the post from Jeff Gluck. Possible penalty coming for Cole Custer after it appeared he helped chase Briscoe. NASCAR's statement is this: NASCAR is reviewing data, video, and radio transmissions from the 41 car following its incident on the backstretch during the final lap. NASCAR will communicate the results of the review early this week. Any potential penalties would not affect the round of 8 field. Okay, so even if something is found with this Custer penalty, at least according to this statement, it's not going to affect the round of 8 field. So it would not take Briscoe out of the top 8, and it would not put a driver like Kyle Larson back in. That is not going to change. So that's at least according to this statement here. It would be penalties focused specifically on the 41 car, and if he was helping Briscoe. I don't know if there's enough evidence because everything was crazy at the end of it, but they're looking into it. And again, I appreciate them looking into it because that shows the diligence that I'm sure has been a hot button issue since the Hamlin and Byron thing at Texas. So you can't really blame them on that sense. So there's that too. Yeah, there's people questioning already. Should this have been done with the Bristol race where it was Larson versus Chase Elliott holding up Harvick? Yeah, probably. But I don't know. So anyway, we'll do some trivia questions here to wrap up. I don't see anything on here. Oh, no, excuse me. Oh, wait, no, hang on. Okay, I saw Gregson's name. I thought it was Xfinity, but I forgot. Yeah, of course, he's in the Cup field. Yes, 3 minutes ago, we do have confirmation from Bob Pockris. Tech is complete, no issues. Bell is the winner. Round of 8 is set. Cindric and Gregson's cars will go to R&D. So those are the 2 cars going to be looked at, Cindric and Gregson. So no penalties. Tech is complete. That means Daniel Kvyat is your last place finisher. For the first time, the first Russian-born driver to finish last in a Cup Series race. And that will be your feature later tonight on the NASCAR page. So, okay, so we do have confirmation of that. So we'll wrap up with some trivia. And again, if you guys have any questions, we'll jump into that. So we'll bring the old late 90s deal out here. The categories again, NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. Those are our categories. NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. Those are your categories. Glenn 7000, what's going on with the Steelers? The Bills kicked their butts. Yeah, they did. That was I wasn't watching the game there during the background in the race, but yeah, very surprised to see it turn out quite the way it is. I know urinating tree's not going to be too happy about that either, but we'll find out. I definitely mentioned in the chats which one you can check out there too. NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. Those are your categories on that. Oh, no tires, just gas. Yeah, thank you for checking out the merch page. Those of you who don't know, I've actually, the merch page for the NASCAR site, I have an old Redbubble page with shirts. That's available on the NASCAR page. You can kind of check that out. I've also opened an eBay page that's a bit easier. I got some requests for people that wanted hats like this, and the easiest way, I just embroider them to order. So I just kind of had that set up on the page there too. You can check out that if you're interested. But yeah, if you just want like a bumper sticker or something like that, I would check out the eBay page because I got a full list of things like that too. I probably should do the 64 scale blind bags again too. People really seemed to like that last year, but I don't have any of those currently in stock. But yeah, if you guys are interested in any of the stickers and whatnot, I do have that still available there too. Let me check this out here. All right. 5 for drivers. Okay. That might be the leader there. All righty. Oh, I saw a question about surprising NASCAR championships. Yes. 8206, you're asking about that. Any surprise drivers win or come close to winning the NASCAR championship? Yeah. Gosh, Kurt Busch almost won it last year. That would have been something. I had a certificate ready just in case. If he finished last at Phoenix, that was going to be his. So that was going to be an interesting set of circumstances there. That was very close. The fact that Jeff Gordon won his in 1993 as a rookie, that one's pretty eye-opening too. There's been other drivers that have come, very close and I think there's also been drivers that maybe you wouldn't expect would have had it. Maybe other drivers struggled a bit more. Andy Houston comes to mind in 2001, where his team closed halfway through the year, but he still had enough last place finishes to clinch that championship. Very nearly had to come from behind a couple of times. 2011, the 55 car that I featured in Diecast last week's show, very nearly came back to take the championship from Michael McDowell down the stretch, but ran out of races at the end there too. There's been a few. I probably should do a video on that at some point too, to kind of discuss different drivers like that too. So that would be kind of cool. But yeah, that would be kind of interesting. Alrighty. I think drivers are probably the category, so we'll do that too. What do you expect at Las Vegas next week? The Wreck Fest we saw in the spring or the tame race from last fall? It's going to be during the day, I think. So I would say probably closer to what we saw in the spring. It might be a bit more chaotic. Depends on how many cars you get in the field, or like, you know, I mean, if you just have the 36 chartered people again, you might be a little bit more predictable. We had a couple open guys in the show last year when Motorsports Business Management was still in it, and they had an issue with the spindle on their car when Yaley was running the Fat Boy Ice Cream Sandwiches car that finished in last. Of course, that race also had Joey Gase with his very serious accident in turn one. Yeah, I don't know. I think it also depends on how the cars hold up. I don't think we're going to get nearly what we saw at Texas. I think that track is just really treacherous. I hope we're not going to have the situations with flat tires, although we did have a good number of flat tires in both Kansas races this year, and that could be a problem there too. I mean, Kansas is a bit closer to Vegas in that sense. It could be extremely low attrition. I am prepared one way or the other. I'm prepared either if I'm probably going to be standing out on pit road during that particular race and standing out there and watching the battle at the back of the field there. It could be we have a low attrition situation, or maybe have a couple guys go in the garage area, have toe links that come apart and get back out there. We saw that even at Sears Point this year. There was a brake issue on Tyler Reddick's car, and he had to spin several laps in the garage and came back out there. We could have a situation there. Or we could have something closer to the Xfinity race where you had a big pileup in turn one and you had several wrecked cars pushed behind the wall there. I think anything goes. I think that maybe I think the fact that it's going to be a day race, I think is going to lend to a bit of a crazier race because you're going to have changing track conditions versus a night race where the field tends to get strung out. That certainly was the case last year. But I don't know, especially after what we saw today. I mean, you got people that are mad, and you got people that are pretty motivated too. You could have a guy like Kyle Larson getting eliminated from it and just goes out there and just says, screw it, and just goes out and wins the race. That could certainly be possible. So, yeah, we'll be doing, drivers for the category here. I think that'll be the one for tonight. Yeah, Jeff Green being the all-time last place guy. Yeah, Diecast Reviews, that would certainly be the guy. Which is surprising in its own right, given his 2000 championship domination. Can't wait for the next starting lineup video. Yeah, actually, we're very close to the next doing another starting lineup video. For those of you who are big fans of those, I am going to do one for the Daytona 500. That's the plan. I just do that one way or the other. Because I know people really enjoy that. But for a bonus grid, which could be Cup, Xfinity, or Trucks, based on the vote of Patreon members. And again, our bonus of being in the Patreon, I think we're just like a couple members short of reaching our next goal, which will be doing another starting grid video. At this point, it would be either, I would open it up at this point. It would be either the last couple races of this season or sometime, next season too. Because of course, we may reach that at kind of at a weird time here. But if we hit that during Vegas or anything afterwards, I'll open that back up to the Patreon members and we'll have their vote on it. And it could be as soon as, probably won't be for the Vegas weekend itself since we'll be out there. But it could be, something maybe a little later down the line. So keep that in mind for sure if you're considering it. Alrighty. Let's see here. First question here, folks. What 1972 NASCAR Winston Cup Rookie of the Year is from Lenoir, North Carolina? What 1972 NASCAR Winston Cup Rookie of the Year is from Lenoir, or is it Lenoir, North Carolina? It's spelled Lenoir. I'm guessing if it's like kind of a French pronunciation, it'd be Lenoir. Lenoir, North Carolina. Which 1972 NASCAR Winston Cup Rookie of the Year is from there? Don't look it up. Try to guess it in the chat here. All right. Hang on here. What 1972 NASCAR Winston Cup Rookie of the Year is from Lenoir, North Carolina? I guess it's for Phil Parsons, Buck Baker, Lenny Pond, Terry, Buddy Baker, Noah Gragson, Frank Reich. There you go. You're looking at Bills players. Okay, there you go. At least former ones. What 1972 NASCAR Winston Cup Rookie of the Year is from Lenoir, North Carolina? The answer is Larry Smith. Larry Smith is the correct answer. 1972. I think Lenny Pond was 75 for a different year. 72 is the correct answer. Yeah, Lenny Pond was kind of in the back of my mind too. But yeah, Larry Smith, it says. Alrighty, here we go, folks. Next question. Who won the 1996 NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series Championship? Larry Smith, if I'm not mistaken, Larry Smith was the driver who he drove the Carling Black Label car, or the and he was killed in a race at Talladega in '73. But yeah, I believe he was a defending Rookie of the Year when that happened. Very bizarre incident there. But yeah, Larry Smith is the correct answer for the '72 Rookie of the Year. Oh yes, who won the 1996 NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series Championship? That is next question. Yes, Larry Smith had 38 Cup starts. He drove 23 of 31 races in '72 on his way to Rookie of the Year. And he lost his life in August of '73 at Talladega. Finished 49th out of 50 cars in the Carling Black Label car, the number 92 Mercury. Yeah, very bizarre one. I remember reading somewhere that it was just a really bizarre incident, that it seemed like it wouldn't be anything that serious, but then turned out to certainly be the case. Who won the 1996 NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series Championship? The answer is Ron Hornaday. Ron Hornaday. The team was actually getting the car ready to go back out and run laps. I believe so, RD Fox. Yeah, that's one that doesn't get talked about a whole lot. I think they played, the MRN played a radio broadcast of that recently. I seem to remember hearing that somewhere. Yeah, the Talladega's got a very, I mean, it's not just hype. Talladega has a very checkered history of bizarre incidents, and some of them did end tragically. Ron Hornaday, a lot of you got that one. Ultimate 23 Dragon, I think you were first on that. Ahead of Diecast Reviews and Joey Fairbanks, Charles Peterson Jr., and so forth. All right, let's see if we can get a harder one here. Okay. Oh, that one's too easy. That was too easy. All right, here we go. Don't look this one up, because this is probably an easy one to verify. How many top 5 finishes did Jeff Gordon have during his rookie season? How many top 5 finishes did Jeff Gordon have during his rookie season? Looking for a number. How many top 5 finishes did Jeff Gordon have during his rookie season? Alrighty. How many top 5 finishes did Jeff Gordon have during his rookie season? I guess it's for 0 and 5 and 11 and 10 and 7 and 8. We got every number. We got 69. We got everything. How many top 5 finishes did he have? The answer is 7. 7 is the correct answer. Zachary Leffler, I think you were the first one on that. Every Talladega is under the full moon. Very good point. 7, Zachary Leffler, Andrew Bremner, F. Mecca. There you go. Absolutely. All right, we'll do a couple more questions here, folks. What famous father-son pair took first and second at Heidelberg in 1960? What famous father-son pair took first and second at Heidelberg in 1960? 1960. That is our next question. What famous father-son pair took first and second at Heidelberg in 1960? Yeah, Jeff Gordon won the 1993 NASCAR championship, but he did still get a lot of top fives. Should have won, I think, the spring Atlanta race. I think he had the pole at the fall Charlotte race. Yeah, I mean, he was up there. You know, he was up there. But it was definitely a different kind of season. What famous father-son pair took first and second at Heidelberg in 1960? All right, get guesses for the Petties, the Jarretts, the Petties, Dale and Carey, Chris Evans and Anthony Mackie. Okay, here we go. What famous father-son pair took first and second at Heidelberg in 1960? The answer is indeed the Petties, Lee and Richard. Lee and Richard Petty. Thank you, Andrew. I'm glad you're enjoying the show tonight. Thank you for tuning in. Yeah, we got 43 for the Petties. There you go, 43 viewers tonight. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll just do a couple more questions and we'll wrap up here for tonight, folks. Now that we got the call. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. This question. Actually, I'm going to make this question last one tonight because this is too good. This is like custom made for the show. And it's actually the question. What NASCAR Winston Cup driver finished last at Talladega and Daytona in 1992? What NASCAR Winston Cup driver finished last at Talladega and Daytona in 1992? Rick and David Flair. There you go. Yeah, 11 DNFs. There you go. Yeah, I think it was it Andy Bell? No, I guess it was the well, 93 was when you had the grocery getters. Or 93 was Jeff Gordon. 92 was when you had the grocery getters for Jimmy Means. So it wouldn't have been the same year. But yeah, you're right, Beast of Metal. Yeah, it came down to bottom 10 tiebreaker on that one. Gosh, we'll have to get the graphics ready too for the upcoming crowning of NASCAR champions. It's always exciting when it comes down to these like last 3 or 4 races. What NASCAR Winston Cup driver finished last at Talladega and Daytona in 1992? Bob Schacht, Davey Allison, Bill Elliott, Kyle Petty, Earnhardt, Kerry Teague, me. No, not quite. What NASCAR Winston Cup driver finished last at Talladega and Daytona in 1992? See, there you go. You can see kind of the half the question there. Yeah. So yeah, so kind of get both parts of it there. Yeah, I thought that was pretty hip. Got a NASCAR question here. That's too good of one to wrap up on. All right, I guess this is for Richard Petty, Jeff Gordon, Greg Sachs. What NASCAR Winston Cup driver finished last at Talladega and Daytona in 1992? And the answer is Dale Earnhardt. Dale Earnhardt, indeed. The man in black got his final last place finishes of his Cup career in 1992. In fact, the number 3 did not finish last again until Austin Dillon was driving the car. And even then, he didn't do it until I think it was like Chicagoland in 2014 or 2015. So yeah, the last couple of years of his career, Earnhardt did not win any championships after 1994, but he did not finish last in any other races. So again, something to be said for the durability of Richard Childress Racing injuries. In fact, through his last start in 2001, finished 12th in that race. So, again, kind of another interesting measure that definitely comes to mind. But yes, Dale Earnhardt is the correct answer. And it wasn't in the 500. Bob Schacht was. I saw Schacht come up as the question there. But Schacht finished last in the Daytona 500. Earnhardt finished last at the July race at Daytona. And then I believe the July race at Talladega, like almost consecutive weeks. It was certainly the same month. There was that. And then he finished last at Martinsville for a third time. Very nearly got the NASCAR championship that year, but Jimmy Means' team pretty much had a grip on that with the start and park efforts that he had that year. Otherwise, Earnhardt would have very easily had a NASCAR championship to go with his 7 Winston Cups. So kind of add that to your list too, being one that's very, very possible there too. So that'll do it for the show tonight, folks. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. My Twitter feed is at LastCar on Brock. My Patreon, patreon.com/LastCar on Brock. And, of course, the content here on this YouTube channel. Our next show will actually not be after the conclusion of the race. I will, as I said, I will be in Las Vegas this weekend to cover the action for the Xfinity and the Cup Series. So definitely stay tuned, especially to the Twitter feed for updates from the track. We'll do our last place features on the Xfinity and the Truck Series. We'll also do the entry list storyline coming into that race weekend. I may do something with Arca West. I've been kind of chewing on that since talking about it on the show tonight, because that's definitely part of the race weekend there. And they put on a good show last year, but we'll see how that kind of shakes out there too. But yeah, again, have a great week, everyone. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. And we'll do our next show when we get back from Vegas. So that'll most likely be either next Monday evening or next Tuesday evening. We'll have more information on that as we go along. So in the meantime, folks, we'll see you then, and we'll go from there. So thank you again for your support. Take care, everyone.